Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. So now 10:30. So very good morning to all of the participants. Hope you all will be safe and healthy. A warm welcome to all in this 21 days training program. Today we have scheduled two lectures. The first will be delivered by Dr. Aishwarya Maheshwari. He is Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences and Course Director of this training program. He will deliver his lecture on role of third pole and geopolitics in wildlife conservation in Central and South Asia. And another will be delivered by Dr. K. Ramesh, scientist, Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. And he will deliver his lecture on integrating technology in research and management from 10:30 onwards. So, first, I would like to formally introduce our first speaker, Dr. Aishwarya Maheshwari. He is certified wildlife scientist with MSc specialization on leopards in the Gir Lion Sanctuary from PhD and PhD from Wildlife Institute of India on snow leopard in the Indian Himalayan region, including Kargil, Ladakh, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. He has been involved on research and conservation of snow leopard in Central and South Asia for more than 15 years. He has visited and given lectures at governmental and non-governmental platforms for around 15 countries worldwide in the wildlife sciences. Dr. Maheshwari has reported two new subspecies, that is red fox subspecies and black moth forest pika from India. He has published several research papers, including some of the most esteemed international journals, such as Science and Nature. Dr. Maheshwari is a member of several IUCN Commission committees, such as CAT Specialist Group, World Commission on Protected Areas, etc. For his academic and professional accomplishments, he has been awarded with prestigious scholarship and award in the Travel and Special Speaker Award, and more particularly, the Conservation Sciences Scholarship from University of Queensland, Australia, Young Scientist Award, and Earth Hero Award by the Royal Bank of Scotland. With this brief introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Maheshwari to deliver his lecture. Dr. Maheshwari, please.
Thank you, Dr. Arbind, for such a generous introduction. And all right, so dear friends, colleagues, and participants, we have been meeting on daily basis, but today I am in some different role. Rather, I would speak as a course director. Today, I would speak as one of the resource persons in this 21 days training program. Hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes,
Can anyone please confirm?
Yes, sir.
My slides presentation is visible?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it is visible, sir.
It is visible.
Great. So under the theme geopolitics conservation, we already have scheduled two lectures. One we have already heard from Dr. Mohammad from University of Oxford yesterday. He has actually eased much of my job on geopolitics. So we decided to add another element in the geopolitics, that is the third pole in wildlife conservation in Asia in particular. Because that's the region where I've been working from last more than a decade now. So I would be talking about this, and I have splitted my presentation in two halves. One, we will touch upon the geopolitics. We will try to build on where yesterday Dr. Mohammad left us. And then we will also move to the third pole. So to begin with, in a very simple words, I would borrow the lines from the great poet Javed Akhtar Sahab to define the geopolitics. And he defined it, almost, I think, more than a decade back in one of his popular poem, or later on popularity was raised with a song in a movie. पंछी नदियां पवन के झोंके, कोई सरहद ना इन्हें रोके, सरहदें इंसानों के लिए हैं, सोचो तुमने और मैंने क्या पाया इंसान होके. So this is the question which I leave to all the participants and viewers, that we made the borders, whereas the wildlife in a true sense do not recognize the borders at all, whether at the national level or at the district level or at the regional level or at the international borders. And we do have significant and substantial evidence to prove that. But after having the territorial boundaries disputes, what we have actually achieved as perhaps the a well-brained animal or a human being on this planet, that is the matter of grave concern as well as deliberation. So with that note, in a very simple words, what is the obvious question is, what is geopolitics? So it is a specific form of the international politics. What it concerns about the behavior of countries at a very multilateral and multi-scalar networks, social, cultural, political, economical, and what we are discussing today in this talk, environmental or the biodiversity perspective of the geopolitics. So when we talk about the behavior of countries, obviously we are talking about the representative of these countries, whether in the form of political representation or in the form of the diplomatic channels or diplomatic representatives of the behavior at different platforms. It includes the various network at the social, cultural, political, economical, as well as environmental. And I would once again borrow the quotes from our two distinguished Prime Minister, and I would leave it on you to identify who actually made these quotes. We can choose our friends, but not neighbors. Another one, we can change our friends, but not neighbors. So anyone can identify who actually said these two, very relevant, very important statements. Anyone? I was expecting that, some of you would be able to identify, who actually made these statements. So
Sir, Manmohan Singh.
Yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you so much. So, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji and Dr. Manmohan Singh Saab actually said these two statements, and if you would look at it, we can choose and change. If I just combine both these statements, we can choose and change our friends. That is, in our purview and under our, wish. But in both the cases, we cannot change or we cannot choose our neighbors. So with that, with these two, very profound quotes, I would start the second perspective of my lecture is the world's third pole, the largest area of ice. And the obvious question, the basic questions come into our mind. Does the third pole really exist? What is it all about? How much do we know about the third pole? Because we all know that we have the North Pole and South Pole, but what is the third pole? What we know, very general facts, even the students and the children are studying nowadays in their syllabus, that is the roof is disappearing, because the often called or often referred, the roof of the world is blank space. You fill in. Role of glaciers in our daily to daily life. So now here explaining some of the generous support from one of my colleague, Dr. Tapajit Bhattacharya, on this very presentation, that we know about the, where I'm taking the cursor is right now the third pole, and we have the South Pole, of course. But in between, somewhere in Central and the Southern Asia, we do have the third pole. So in some of the next slides, we will talk about here the circle comes the third pole. So the Hindu Kush Himalayan region spans over a huge area, almost 4.3 million square kilometer in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. So these are the network of the countries where the Hindu Kush Himalayan region is spread over. The region, stores more snow and ice than anywhere else in the world, outside the polar regions, of course. And that is why it has been named as the third pole after the North and the South Pole. The third pole is also, popular as some of the very highest or the world's highest mountain peaks chains in the world above 8,000 meters. And of course, the water towers originating, the major rivers in South Asia. So this is the spreaded over the Karakoram range, just to give you a glimpse of the mountain regions in the third pole. So the Himalaya, the Karakoram range, the Pamirs, the Tian Shan, Kulun Shan in the Tibetan plateau, and this is spreaded over all these countries what we are looking at it here. If we would compare it with the existing, apart from the North Pole and South Pole, Asia, the snow covered areas on planet, then here we have the blocks and the polygons in the form of the yellow color. So we would look at the Southern and Central Asia, the number which we have given here, 13, 14, and 15, are actually the areas particularly or predominantly number 13, the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, which has the most of the region here. Sorry. Yeah. If we just zoom in the Himalayan region from that Hindu Kush Himalayan region, the entire third pole area, then we have here the climatic variations. If we would compare, for example, some of our participants come from the Jammu and Kashmir region. I think one of them has also come from the Himachal Pradesh, somewhere here, and then Uttarakhand. We do have some participants from there as well. Once again, we have the participants from the Sikkim and as well as from the Arunachal Pradesh. So if we would divide the Himalayan belt, of course, in the Western Himalaya and the Eastern Himalaya. And if you would just compare them, then we have the more, dominated precipitation, less monsoon, and what we call that area, Western Himalaya, as the rain shadow areas or the cold desert areas, the Trans-Himalayan region as the biogeographic zone, what we learned from the yesterday presentation by Dr. Ramesh. In comparison with the Eastern Himalaya, less dominated precipitation in the form of the wind, but we do perceive or we do receive more monsoon and influenced precipitation in the Eastern Himalaya. That is why our tree line goes up to the 4,000 meter in the Eastern Himalaya, whereas in the Western Himalaya, we do have it much lower and which, disappears, let's say 2,500 meter or maximum by 3,000 meter elevation. So less intense melting, more sensitive to precipitation changes in and wind. So if a general trend, which I would be talking about, scientifically proven and significant data in the upcoming slides, that we have a less melting reported and proven in comparison to the Western Himalaya, in comparison to the Eastern Himalaya. So the Himalaya has as I mentioned earlier, altogether there are almost close to 15,000 glaciers across, located in this range, which are at the vulnerable stage right now, as we all know. These are slides very popular, in the climate change and, in the presentation of the melting the Himalaya. We already have seen these slides, the comparison of the Rongbuk Glacier 21 and 2017. Then the Pindari Glacier in Uttarakhand 1936, and now look at it, almost disappeared. I surveyed them, in 2006. Then the Gangotri Glacier, of course, the origin of the Ganges in Uttarakhand. in 1960, and what has actually been in 2015, because I've surveyed them twice in 2006 and 2015. Much of the glaciers have been now depleted and melted away. So that's what, a comparison from this very important piece of paper published in 2012. You look at entire set of data set from Sikkim, Eastern Himalaya, Central Himalaya, Western Himalaya, as well as in case of Karakoram. All the graphs are showing actually a tremendous decline as far as their area and their melting of the glacier is concerned. There was a debate sometimes back that the methodology has been followed by these different scientific studies might be different, but the outcome was more or less the same, that we are losing our glaciers, or we are losing the source of the major rivers, which are the lifeline of the South Asian region in these areas, in very simple words. So we have divided the entire belt into the 4 zones, and I would give you a brief snapshot. Zone 1, mainly we are talking about the Afghanistan. We will come back to Afghanistan in more detail, what is actually happening in Afghanistan nowadays, since the Taliban has taken over in this country. Relatively stable or very slow retreating of the glacier has been reported from this zone 1. Compared to the zone 2, the Northwest Himalaya, including the Karakoram, what we just now discussed about, highly varied glacier behavior comparatively to few large lakes in this area. Zone 3, what we are talking about, particularly covering 3 states within our country, that is Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, and Himachal Pradesh, and the Southwest Tibet, and some part of Nepal as well. Mainly stagnating, retreating snouts, and there are fewer lakes than in the Eastern Himalaya. We come to the zone 4, that is Bhutan, Sikkim, and much of the Western Arunachal Pradesh. So these are the areas where large glacial lakes have been reported. That means the glaciers are melting much at a speedy rate in comparison to the Western Himalaya since 1960s. So this was the snapshot of the zone 1 to zone 4. Now we would look at much more popular pictures in the public domain, that is the 18, that how the Kedarnath shrine, one of the holy pilgrimage sites for the Hindus in the country, would look at in 2010, but then the devastation happened in 2013. How did it look? And now coming back in 2015, again restoring its glory. That's great. So in summary, what we have learned from the current status of the 3rd pole, that the glaciers in the 3rd pole are melting rapidly. The crucial mountain ecosystem have been degraded, a critical point of instability, because restoration at once upon a time is seems, I would say, manageable, but if the natural ecosystems are degraded at certain points, then they will not or they will never be able to restore. And these ecosystems, as most of you would understand, are the fragile ecosystem at the top of the world, or often said roof of the world, are actually very difficult or next to impossible to restore. So mixed mountain regions, forests, an enormous difference to the making of ice and snow. So in a nutshell, what we can profoundly and unfortunately uphold for our own consequences, that climate change is one of the biggest natural disaster caused by us. No one else is responsible for this. So coming from the geopolitical background, talking about the demography, touching upon the what is happening on the 3rd pole, can wildlife, I'm now coming to the main business in which I'm sector in, be used as an indicator as well as a tool to conserve the 3rd pole? Then who would be the flag bearer for the 3rd pole in these areas? So an animal that lives in some of the remote locations and inaccessible places on Earth, information on this particular animal as scanty as the animal itself, and an animal is at the apex of the high altitude ecosystem and as an indicator of species of such environments. My dear friends, you might have guessed the animal, and that the animal what Dr. Mohammad yesterday also talked about, because that's what the animal I always say, easy to correlate, the tiger of the high mountains or the snow leopard. Migration without borders, and it is phenomenal. So in a brief story, one of my very dear friend and close colleague I have worked with in 2006, Dr. Tom McCarthy and his team, working for the Panthera. I studied the radio collaring and radio collared individual in the Chitral Gol National Park in Pakistan. The park was established to protect these snow leopards, and then the snow leopard was off. And it actually, made as a path between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So a true flag bearer, and we can also understand from this map by WWF Nepal, that what you are seeing here in a orangish area and the dark spots here, the locations of the snow leopard in the Kanchenjunga Conservation Area in Sikkim, and where the cat was actually moving all across the borders between India and Pakistan. So this is the species we are talking about, and that's not just a predator is closely has been scientifically proven that crossing the borders, of course, without visa in these areas, but the prey base as well. So whether we talk about the blue sheep, ibex, urial, all the high altitude ungulate species, principal and preferred prey of these for these predator found in these areas, also do it quite frequently. So this is the map which we made, a couple of years back. We do have an guesstimate. Not unlike tigers, we do not have the exact estimate for snow leopard, but there might be, based on the habitat suitability modeling, huge area of Central and Southern Asia. And what we are talking about, where I'm taking my cursor right now, the red. Yeah, Dr. Amarji, do you have a question here?
No, sir. No, sir. Please continue.
Okay. What we are polygon here seeing in the red polygons, actually, the landscape which have been identified for the snow leopard conservation for a long-term basis. Dr. Majid, could you please mute yourself if you do not have a question? Thank you. So what we are looking at it here, that Dr. Amarjit, you are actually disturbing the class. Thank you. So there is an international, intergovernmental platform has been constituted in 2013, 2012, popularly called as GSLAP, or Global Snow Leopard Ecosystem Protection Priorities. And in this GSLAP platform, the integrated snow leopard conservation with local and global economies, they are some of the core principles. Ensuring landscape level transboundary conservation. So what I just now showed you in the red polygons, it is actually talking about that. Then building capacity for cross-sectoral response. So in a nutshell, snow leopard actually the flag bearer and has been considered as the flag bearer for the conservation for not only just a species, but rather as an umbrella species for the entire high altitude ecosystem in the Central and Southern Asia, which is also the home of the third pole or the major ice or snow in the world after the North and South pole. Coming back to the geopolitics, what we're talking about here and what Dr. Mohammad yesterday also briefed us about, that there have been pieces, scientific articles and papers where the peace park establishment has been advocated very profoundly to mitigate the century-old conflict in the Central and Southern Asia. Coming back to Afghanistan, we published this piece very recently, last month only, and you can get the copy of this and the previous article as well we published in Science and in Nature. It actually advocates that what is actually happening in Afghanistan last year, The returned Taliban has been, ruled over the government, and we now have the concerns that how the long-term, the future of the really vulnerable and threatening wildlife in the Afghanistan. Because I've visited these areas way back in 2014, and we do have, wilderness and wildlife intact, which is very important from a global perspective in this region. But the historical perspective had clearly proven that there had been difficult and challenging times whenever the Taliban has, taken over the government in Afghanistan and became a threat to the survival of the long-term survival of the wildlife and the wildlife scientists in the region. So the evacuation has been, conducted, and they are still going on in Afghanistan. But there have been concerns, and which has been expressed at the international level, that if the security of the wildlife scientist, the biologist, will be secured and guaranteed by the current ruling government of the Afghanistan, then it would be better to comment on the long-term survival of the wildlife in the region, to avoid the over harvesting or hunting or the poaching of the wildlife in these regions, where this has been reported in the previous scientific articles as well. So how wildlife can contribute? As I earlier mentioned, that peace park is a concept of demilitarization. So it is the area where none of the government military would be allowed. So DMC, or the demilitarization, for the wildlife conservation. So peace park, are the transboundary areas, as I mentioned in my previous slides and maps, that are formally dedicated to the protection and maintenance of biodiversity and natural and associated cultural resources, and to the promotion of peace and cooperation. So between the two countries, of course, the transboundary areas, these are particularly, I would not call them no man's land, but these are like the areas where research, cultural activities and similar kind of activities would be allowed, but no military activities, no ammunitions or weapons would be allowed. So we are talking about the establishing the peace in these areas. So keeping aside the international and the more, profoundly in the Western countries or the European countries, the examples of peace park, we do have a very, few examples from the Southern Asia as well. So some of you might have heard about the famous conservationist, Dr. George Schaller. So Pakistani authorities established the Khunjerab National Park in the country's extreme north, the tip of the north of Pakistan, bordering with China. So that is one of the excellent example where peace park have been established in the South Asia as well. So the creation of the peace park, I can actually affirm that may contribute to resolving the half-century-old military or international conflict and preserving the third pole with using the wildlife as a tool. So we have, a win-win situation if we follow the concept of the peace park in these areas. But it is not that easy, because we do have the developmental activities, and our friends who come from the not belonging to the high altitude areas may wonder that what kind of developmental activities in these areas. So let me update you that there are developmental activities in the form of whether hydroelectricity dams widening or reaching the roads to the borders. There have been and there are proposals, and the work has already been started in some of the proposals where the Pakistan and China border, the popular economic corridor which joins these two countries with the roads. The similar kind of BRI, the Belt Road Initiative, has also already been criticized because it will give the access to the elements or the inaccessible areas on this planet or the roof of the world, which were never been accessible. And of course, there are no, permanent or temporary settlement in these areas. Then why do we want to be in these areas? These are, pristine habitats for the wildlife. Then the amount or the element of the poaching and the other kind of illegal activities cannot be ruled out if the inaccessible areas are accessible in terms of the roof of the world. So that was, so what could be the implementation studies? And believe me that it sounds too good to be true, kind of a phenomenon here. And it is a multi-sectoral, multilateral alignment. And what we are looking at it here is the red and blue, the opportunities and the challenges in red. And it is a multi-sectoral, as I earlier mentioned, and that is the scenario for Hindu-Kush Himalayan region for 2080. That whatever we have the key player or the stakeholders come then aboard. So whether it is mountain niches, political instability, political pollution, ecosystem degradation, climate change scenarios, cultural diversity, regional integration, sustainable biodiversity, ecotourism, of course, renewable energy. And what we have in the form of the blue here is the baseline in 2015. And COP21 has been successful in the form of the grayish color. So we do have some success to put it on the table, but we do not have rectified a lot of agendas from that. So it is going to be really challenging and difficult when we talk about the multi-sectoral and multilateral alignment to be come on board and to make it a really some sort of a doable nature. So that's what Dr. Mohammad also talked about, the Russian and the Ukraine currently. If you talk about the one of the question was asked yesterday, do we have a scope of the such alignments or such doability in there? Of course not, because the countries are still fighting for their territorial disputes. Until and unless those kind of things, the ownership on the land could be sorted out or resolved, we cannot talk about the biodiversity conservation. So I would end my presentation with an alarming note that extinction is inevitable in the globalized world. This is the piece which we published last year, 2020, last year, and is a natural process apart from the island biodiversity, what we have learned from the Dr. Alok Saxena Sahab. But in general, it is a natural process. And we as a human also, arrived on this planet or evolved on this planet in the form of the expiry date. But what we are doing actually, we are actually extending our expiry date at the cost of the other species. So other species are wiping out very fastly, but not the human being, because we are ruling this planet. So these are the guardian of the mountains, and we should join hands for their conservation. So thank you very much. That was a brief of my presentation today. So I'm open for the question now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maheshwari. Excellent presentation presented by you. And now session is open for discussion. If participants have any query, you can ask directly to Dr. Maheshwari.
Can you tell about something about trade going on between J&K and China?
Talking about this economical trade, or you are talking about the wildlife illegal trade?
No, I found some examples which are going illegal.
Your voice is actually breaking. I'm not able to hear you properly, Dr. Ali. You're talking about the wildlife illegal trade?
Yes.
Yeah, so I will also send that wildlife illegal trade has been reported from the entire belt, I would say. And some of my surveys in these countries, for example, Afghanistan, Mongolia, and Nepal and China, that we do have wildlife illegal trade in these areas, because we recorded the species which are not found originally in these areas but have been smuggled through across the border in these areas. And that is why, we always advocate the transboundary conservation initiatives, kind of a task force which can be allowed through the joint and mutual understanding between and amongst the countries to stop such illegal trade. So some of the illegal trade areas have been identified, but due to obvious reasons, because these areas are not open to all, including some of the countries do not allow certain passport holders countries to go and visit and work in the borderline areas due to obvious reasons. That is why all the hotspots not have been so far identified or earmarked, but of course we do know about that there are illegal trade happening for certain charismatic species in these areas. So that is what to answer to your question. All right, great. So, thank you very much.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Dr. Arbind, please.
Sir, while all this coaching is done and all these materials are exported to China and your Southeast countries, how this trans-border conservation will be effective with respect to India and its neighboring countries?
Yeah, of course, China has been identified as one of the international markets, but I want add to that statement that it is not just China. We have the South Asian countries also, a huge market for the illegal wildlife trade. If you talk about the other species, other than the charismatic species, you talk about the Indian monitor lizard, the parakeets, the turtles, and other, wildlife. They have a huge illegal trade market within India as well. So we cannot blame every time China to have the illegal trade market per se. Similar things are happening in Indonesia, in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, and other South Asian countries. So the trade routes are, it's a contraband of which is a very secretive and underground market. We do have a very fairly implementation of the legislation and laws at the national level, and as well as we do have consortium and the international laws and legislation in place, but the implementation varies across the countries. So we will have to understand it how logically and how strictly the national laws and legislation have been implemented in the countries where within the countries the illegal trade is happening. And then talking about the cross boundary or the transboundary wildlife illegal trade, obviously it is happening. That is why we have the Caesars. That is why there are organizations within the government and non-government organizations provide training to the custom officers, provide training to the police forces and the military and paramilitary forces as well across the countries, because they do not have the proper understanding within their routine set of training what type illegal trade is all about. So that is why there have been very good success stories where these paramilitary and military and the police forces custom officers have been trained that how to curb the illegal wildlife poaching cases, how to report them, how to store the material, and what are the legal consequences they should be or they must be aware of for the general awareness as well.
Thank you, sir.
All right, great.
Thank you, Dr. Maheshwari. Any question from participants? If there is no, then I invite to Dr. Kaushal for formal vote of thanks to Dr. Maheshwari. Dr. Kaushal, please.
Thank you, Dr. Arbind Gupta. Dr. Aishwarya Maheshwari is always inspiration to us. He is doing a commendable job in field of wildlife, and he is a well-known figure nowadays in the geopolitics or wildlife conservation in transboundary. and he's did very renowned work in the field of snow leopard conservation, and known by the a well-known scientist in the field of wildlife on working on the snow leopard in various countries, and he's a well-known figure as a member of so many IUCN societies or associations. So thank you, Dr. Aishwarya Maheshwari, for enriching our participants. You are always enriched from your words now, but today you enrich as a resource person. Thank you from heart, by my heart, to give your valuable time as a resource person. Thank you, Dr. Maheshwari.
Thank you so much, sir. I was not expecting a formal vote of thanks, but thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my ideas and experiences. So I will now take over as the course director once again. So dear participants, we will rejoin at 11, let's say 25, 5 minutes before, and we look forward to the upcoming presentation by Dr. K. Ramesh, because he will be talking about the wildlife techniques, the integration of the technology and in the research, wildlife research. So see you at 11:25. Thank you.